All right, Scott Trainer, Decision Desk HQ, with us crunching the data and making the calls for us this evening. Scott, I'm looking right now, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 votes between Oz and McCormick. There's no way this doesn't go to a recount, right?
Well, it's close enough. That's what we were saying about the Donald Trump-Biden race in Pennsylvania in 2020. No way it goes to a recount, and it didn't. It certainly looks close. It's a half a point. What I will say is the models are showing, and the way the votes have been breaking, because they break it out by election day votes, people who voted today, and absentee votes, people who voted mail-in votes in the past. Based on how they've counted it and who's been winning those, we know that Mehmet Oz is going to close the gap. The question is he going to close the gap and make it close within recount? Is he going to close the gap and make it ahead in recount? Or is he going to close the gap and get out of recount range? And that's the question here. And then Kathy Barnett's not out of it either. She's showing pretty strong strength in the Philadelphia suburbs. That's why we're looking at Montgomery County, which does a lot of votes out. She could make this interesting. If I were a betting person, which I am, I'm not betting on her, but she's certainly pulling some votes in and making it difficult for Mehmet Oz in the Philadelphia suburbs to take the lead over McCormick. All across the board, there are scenarios where everyone's at, but it's hard to say who's going to win other than we need to see a lot more votes come out.
So talk a little bit more about where some of the votes are coming in and what's out. And if you're Dr. Oz tonight, are you nervous at this point, or is it still too far away?
I think you're moderately confident because you knew that, or at least you thought you knew that you were going to be behind as votes came out, because McCormick had a lot of the absentees and was going to build a lead, and you knew you were going to close. The question is, are you going to close by enough? He's showing some strength in Western Pennsylvania, McCormick's home base. He's losing, but he's not losing by the margins we thought he was going to lose. So that's showing some strength. And McCormick is not showing the strength around the Philadelphia suburbs that he needs to show so that he can overtake Oz. That's really where the fight is. And then when you put Kathy Barnett in there, she's sapping votes away from both of them. So, there's good pieces for both of them. My projection now, and projections are models, and models can be wrong. My projection now is Mehmet Oz is going to make it closer. And we're going to wait to see if he overtakes him. If he overtakes him, it's within a half a point. We're going to be talking about this for a couple of days.
You made a great point where you said Kathy Barnett is taking votes from both of them. 2 weeks ago, we didn't even mention Kathy Barnett when we talked about Pennsylvania GOP Senate. You very rightly said this was the race to watch. We just didn't realize why. Who is she taking more votes from? I'm looking at the Philadelphia suburbs. Conceivably, that would be Oz territory. Looking at some of the areas just north of Pittsburgh, conceivably that would also be Oz territory.
It's interesting you say that. The argument is she's taking votes from both of them, right? In the sense that people who aren't necessarily, they didn't like the nasty fight that Oz and McCormick have had over the last few months. If you remember, McCormick spent millions of dollars attacking Oz. Oz spent millions of dollars and had Trump rallies attacking each other. And so these Kathy Barnett voters in the last couple of weeks, they looked at it, they didn't like it. And they said, I'm a McCormick voter, but I didn't like what he was doing. I'm an Oz voter. I didn't like what he was doing, so I'm going to vote for Kathy Barnett. She's taking from both, whether it's the suburbs of Pittsburgh or the suburbs of Philadelphia, her hometown. She's arguably, she's a cross-appeal candidate in a Republican primary.
Scott, I want to get your thoughts tonight on John Fetterman. He has secured the Democratic nomination for Senate in tonight's primary. Of course, he won tonight after having these health issues, scary health issues in the last few days, a stroke, a pacemaker. Who is the candidate on the Republican side that will give him the biggest and toughest race come November?
It's a good question. Fetterman is the best candidate for the Democrats, and it's good to hear that it sounds like he's recovering. He'll make a full recovery and make it a race. Against McCormick, who's a hedge fund billionaire self-funder, Fetterman wears sandals and T-shirts and hoodies out on the trail. He's going to look like an everyman compared to McCormick. And then against Oz, who's a good showman, very good on the camera and all that, Fetterman's not bad either. He plays well against him as well. And if it's a Kathy Barnett, both of those guys, both those candidates have grassroots appeal. I think he matches well up against all three of them. If you're any one of those three, you are worried about Fetterman. So it's a slight edge to Fetterman simply because of where Pennsylvania was in 2020 and the fact that he's a strong candidate and is going to raise a lot of money. It's still a toss-up, but if you're Fetterman, you feel pretty good about any of those three.
Scott, when we're looking in terms of where the vote is breaking and who it's breaking for, what does that inform us for the general election here, both in terms of the issues that drive Republicans to the polls and also Republican enthusiasm?
You know, it's interesting. I would say Pennsylvania specifically is a microcosm because I think Kathy Barnett's rise has a lot to do with her pro-life stance and the Republican, very, very heavily Catholic Republican primary electorate, which may or may not, have impacts in other races. But I think her rise is a lot due to that. And then you look at the fact that, Mehmet Oz had a Trump endorsement. So I think that has a factor. But then again, Madison Cawthorn down in North Carolina had a Trump endorsement, and he did not win his primary. And so that's a long way of me saying is there is a wish-wash of issues, and it's state by state. And I don't know what we're going to be talking about 2 to 3 months from now, whether it's inflation, whether it's, the war in Ukraine or whatever it is. But these states are very individualistic. And when we do Georgia next week, it'll be something else.
Weigh in on the Cawthorn situation tonight. He conceded the race to Chuck Edwards pretty early in the night once the results came in and it looked like everything was shaking out the way it did. Are you surprised by what happened in North Carolina?
I am. I think I was on this network a few hours ago saying that, Cawthorn's the favorite. Wasn't a guaranteed win, and he was a favorite because he had, some significant troubles in the district, but he had 7 opponents. And so the 7 opponents were going to split the vote. Edwards did what he needed to do. He won the early vote. He went out and he raised and spent the money, and he got his name ID up. I am surprised. And I am surprised that Madison Cawthorn was defeated relatively early in the night, and it looks like it's going to be definitely outside of recount. So that's a significant loss for him. And also a guy who got a Trump endorsement. So we have to add that to the tally in our analysis going forward. We've
got a couple of gubernatorial races that we were following tonight in the primary. Far-right contender Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania will face off against Josh Shapiro come November. What are your thoughts on that race moving forward, and who do you think has the strength going into the general?
You know what? I think that race is largely be dictated by the Senate race, right? So we were talking earlier about Fetterman. Those Fetterman versus whoever wins the GOP Senate primary, that is going to be the premier race. That is the top tier race. That is going to be driving turnout and be driving the money. And so I think, whoever comes out in there, they're going to have some coattails, and those coattails will be able to push a Josh Shapiro or a Mastriano over the top. I will say this, the RGA, Republican Governors Association, released an interesting statement about how much they're going to support Mastriano going forward. He's got some issues. He's got some issues with the party and the function in that. So that'll be interesting to see how that rolls, how it solves itself. But this is a long way of me saying, at least in Pennsylvania, the governor's race is going to be largely influenced by that Senate race.
Let me flip it around for you. Does Doug Mastriano, when you think about him campaigning at an event promoting QAnon and conspiracy theories about 9/11, he's got some pretty serious issues in the same way that Republicans were very worried about having to answer for, say, some of Kathy Barnett's tweets in Georgia and in Ohio, and have their Senate candidate in North Carolina have to answer for and the like. I'm thinking the Todd Akin legitimate rape kind of situation in 2012. How worried are Republicans in Pennsylvania of Mastriano dragging down the Senate candidate?
I think they're very worried. And you can see it if you read between the lines on the RGA statement about their level of support. But as a party, you have to support your party's nominees. Mastriano was elected in a fair election, a Republican GOP primary. That's who they want, and so that's who the primary is going to support. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the strongest candidate in the fall, but the party's got to support the party-nominated candidates. And so I think if you're a party insider and you're a consultant, you're worried about it. But if you're a Republican primary voter in Pennsylvania, the majority got who they wanted.
Scott, Leland brought this up earlier, and the balance of power is so critical come November, and Republicans are looking to open up whatever the easiest pathway is to win both chambers of the House and Senate come November. What do you think in terms of the races, the Senate races, particularly tonight and in Georgia and in the weeks ahead, are the ones that will be key for them to open up that easy road to make that happen?
Got it. So the race we were covering 2 weeks ago in Ohio, that'll be a big one. Tim Ryan versus J.D. Vance. Tim Ryan is a Fetterman-like candidate in his own state. He's a strong Democratic candidate in a very Republican Ohio. He is going to put up a fight against a well-funded and a good candidate himself, J.D. Vance. So that'll be a deciding factor. We have tonight in Pennsylvania, we just talked about Fetterman versus whoever wins the GOP primary there. He's a strong candidate, but all three of the GOP candidates, whichever one wins, will have the money and have the resources and have the star power to make a go at it. And then we're going to be talking about Georgia next week, where the Republicans have Herschel Walker, who also had some issues and some lack of institutional support early on, but it looks like the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, is the establishment is coming behind him. Those are going to be the races that we're going to be talking about control of the Senate, which is going to be extremely important. The Senate, as we know, controls Supreme Court justice nominations, and has always been the slowdown for legislation. And so controlling the Senate along with where we think the House is going to be a big deal. And when we're talking about this in a few months, it'll be Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. So you're witnessing the preview of what we're going to look at this fall.
Right. How about Kentucky tonight? Senator Rand Paul securing that nomination. He's, of course, been in that seat since 2011. He's got Charles Booker to face in November.
Yeah, Charles Booker. And you know what? Senator Paul was an easy win. He hasn't had a tough race since his primary, when he won his primary, several cycles ago. I think Booker's going to raise a lot of money. I think Senator Rand Paul is going to raise a lot of money, but I think Senator Rand Paul is going to be the prevailing candidate there again. It's just where Kentucky is right now, and Senator Rand Paul has figured out how to make himself a popular and a fixture inside Kentucky. So he's going to, the projection is, and we make projections wrong all the time, but the projection is Senator Rand Paul is going to have is going to be favored this fall.
Scott, getting back to Pennsylvania and where we're at, I'm looking now as more of the votes are coming in. You're right, there is a closing. It seems to be trading back and forth, and if it's a closing, it's a very small one. If Oz wins, this proves what? If McCormick wins, it proves what?
That's a good question. If Oz wins, we'll be talking about how a Trump endorsement helped him push him over the top. If McCormick wins, we will be talking about, is McCormick another Youngkin-like candidate? A
MAGA without
reasonable
the crazy.
businessman MAGA without the crazy. That's one way to put it. But that's what he is, and I think we will be talking about how rich moneyed candidates can still win, campaigns that are largely about grassroots. And so I think McCormick looks like a Youngkin, and that's what we'll be talking about if he wins. And Mehmet Oz is that Trump endorsed candidate, and that'll just be another feather in the president's cap.
Real quick, in terms of the data, as we look at the about 3,000 votes, I don't know if you have returns separating them right now as the data comes in. Depending on whose data you're looking at, that might close a little bit in the next couple of minutes. How much vote is really still out, and in what counties is it out, which then sort of moves towards which candidate?
That is a good question. I have been away from my computer and my caffeine for the last 10 minutes, so I don't have the most up-to-date answer. But what I would say is before I went on campus,
if the vote is out where that favors McCormick, and if it's out in some place else, it favors Oz, and why with those voters?
Yeah. If you're Oz, you want the vote coming out of the Philadelphia suburbs, and you want that to break your way. If you're McCormick, you want the vote to come out of your home area around Pittsburgh, and you're not necessarily expecting to win those splits, but you're expecting it to be a lot closer than it should. Because right now, if you're McCormick, you've got a few thousand vote lead. You just need to protect the lead, right? It's a baseball game. If you're up 9-6, you're okay giving up 2 runs as long as you still got the that 1-run lead at the end of the game. And that's kind of where McCormick is right now. We are in the 6th inning of this race. There are 3 innings to go. McCormick just needs to hold on to that lead. And so Western Pennsylvania for McCormick, Philadelphia for Mehmet Oz.
Yeah, and so many of those Philadelphia suburbs, and as you go north, trickle into New Jersey as well, where you'd expect sort of President Trump's endorsement to mean more.
I know we're keeping you from your numbers,
Montgomery County.
Your number crunching. We'll let you go here in just one second. But you mentioned turnout earlier. It's typically low for primaries. Is that still the case this year right now?
It's funny you brought that up. So let's look at the Madison Cawthorn race. We had to revise our live turnout model several times throughout the night. And that district had the highest Republican primary turnout we've seen in a while and beat our initial projections by 110, 115%. What that means is, you know, even based on our projections, which are pretty good, as more people were voting, we said, hey, we had to revise them up. We are doing similar things in Pennsylvania, but not to the extent that we did in North Carolina. When we looked at what happened in Ohio, we saw higher turnout. We didn't necessarily see that same jump in Nebraska last week. We are expecting a high turnout in Georgia next week. So this is a long way of me saying is we see increased turnout in some of these Republican primaries and some of these Democratic primaries, but it's in line with what's expected with a few exceptions that I mentioned earlier. And so we're not looking at 2018 where we had 2018 turnout that rivaled some presidential years, which had not been seen before in modern times.
Yeah, just in terms of some of the data that we're being able to look out here, and I know this will mean something to you. Bucks County, for example, half of the vote still out, which is now breaking right now, 33-29 for Oz. So to your point, there's a lot of runs to still come across home plate. Scott, thank you very much.
That's a county.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, look for Oz to get 35-37. That's the number you're looking at, that one.
All right.
All right.
A man who knows his numbers.
That's right. He's the numbers guy crunching them. All right, here is a